You know when you're on a date and things just feel like they're flowing, and then suddenly something shifts. You're not quite sure what it is, but it doesn't feel like what was going on a couple seconds ago. That's the moment that we're going to zoom in on today, because how you handle that moment determines whether she becomes more attracted to you or you end up feeling more like a friend. What you're experiencing is tension. And right now you're at a choice point of how you navigate it. And if your knee-jerk reaction is to think, did I say something? Should I say something? Should I make a joke? How can we smooth this over? Then instead of picking a path that would lead to more attraction building, then you're habitually picking a path that neutralizes the space that's needed for attraction to build. This is what we're going to dive into today, because your ability to navigate tension and specifically discern the difference between uncomfortable tension and what builds as sexual tension is going to be the subtle difference between you feeling like you're always in that fawn response, people pleasing, and you feeling like the attractive, magnetic version of yourself that you want to be presenting in the dating space. If you're new to my work, my name's Courtney Shand, and I love helping men with depth date. And I find there's just a little extra nuance needed in these conversations. That's what I want to dig into today, so that you can get clear on why you're doing this. 3 things that you learned that are making building attraction, and specifically that sexual tension that you're after, more evasive in your adult relationships. And what to do instead, so that you can feel like the most attractive version of yourself around women. Because I'm almost willing to bet that you have a pretty consistent response when you experience any sense of tension. And it'll usually play out in some sort of fawn response, where internally it feels like you're doing double time just to make sure that everyone around you is seeming comfortable and happy in your presence. Because when we trace this back to its roots, usually you were more perceptive when you were a child than maybe the people around you. That's a common pattern that I see with the people that I work with. You were able to detect nuances that other people couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge, like the subtle dynamics, the underlying tension, the emotional undercurrents. You could pick up on those. And often when you went to a parent or someone in your world to ask about this experience that you were having and help you understand it, you noticed that they seemed either oblivious to it, told you that you were too sensitive, or you were overthinking it, or worse, they said nothing, but you still felt their discomfort as you brought it up. And so, like the really perceptive, smart kid that you were, you learned ways to manage it, to smooth it over, to make yourself smaller, to try to perceive less of what makes other people uncomfortable. Because you started to associate that what you were perceiving made the situation worse. And I'm willing to bet that there's still areas of your life, specifically dating is where this one often shows up, where this is still the strategy that you often employ. Because if we dial this in even more, the specific story that I hear most often is, I caused it, therefore I have to fix it, especially when it comes to tension in a space. There are 3 main ways that this shows up in terms of the stories that you tell yourself that are unconsciously running how you show up as an adult. The first one being, I caused it, the tension, that is, so I have to fix it. This is going to put you in the traditional people pleaser role, and I'm not going to go too far into that pattern. I'll put a video I made about it right here. The second one is, what I want is somehow dangerous to express. Whether it creates a feeling of loneliness when you've expressed it, feeling judged or humiliated, or another really painful one, which is disappointment. You learned that your desires need to be suppressed in order to reduce any kind of friction. I'm not going to go too far into that because I made a video about owning what it is that you do want, and I'm going to put that one here as well. But the last one, and the one that I've been hearing most often lately, is that people's emotional climate is your responsibility. Because you're someone who is able to sense things that are happening at a deeper level, you probably are picking up on more information than people are consciously aware of that they're putting out. And therefore, you tend to associate the fact that if you can feel it or sense it, that it's your responsibility to manage it. This one can be really sneaky because a lot of times you will actually assume that because you can feel it, it's yours. And you may find yourself feeling drained in certain situations because it requires a lot of emotional labor to be around certain people. And what's actually happening is that because you're able to sense things at a deeper layer than maybe they're consciously aware of, you're picking up on their experience, assuming it's yours, and digesting it on their behalf. Again, this is really subtle, but I find that it causes you to be overly attuned to other people's emotional experience. And one of the skills that we actually have to learn is how to be with people when they're not okay. so that we can actually provide the support that they need to manage what's theirs on their own. And I made a video a few weeks ago about the difference between true empathy and emotional overfunctioning, and I'm going to put it here as well. Regardless of how this plays out for you, all three of these condense to the same underlying belief. It feels uncomfortable and like I'm unsafe in the connection. And therefore, if I get rid of the tension, everything will go back to being okay. This is why you feel compelled to make a joke, over-explain, backpedal, apologize when you didn't do anything wrong, and anything else to diffuse the tension that you're subtly picking up on. But here's where it gets tricky, because consciously, as an adult, you may be wanting to create sexual tension in a romantic relationship, while unconsciously still running these patterns to diffuse any tension that you pick up on. It's like you're kicking the legs out from under your own chair. If that is the case, here's what you need to understand instead. Tension is not something that you caused. It's something that happens in a dynamic. And when it comes to adult romantic relationships, it's actually needed for polarity to exist, which is why I want to give you some more language for it and a different way of seeing this, because it's not your job to reduce tension. It's your job as an adult to learn how to be with tension and learn how to navigate it differently than you were taught originally. And I promise when you do learn how to be with this in your visceral experience, it's going to show up in every other area of your life, not just romantic relationships. And your being able to stay present with it and navigate it appropriately is going to determine the success of those experiences in everything from your career to social dynamics and even just how you move in the world with a different sense of solidarity and presence in yourself. Let's put this into some real life examples, shall we? Because I'm sure you've had each of these examples, and I want to apply a new lens to how you see each of these examples so that you can start to feel into a different reality that's possible for you when you start to expand your nervous system's capacity to be with tension. The first one is that lull in conversation. There's a pause, a moment of space or silence when neither of you is saying anything in the moment. And maybe historically your nervous system has registered that as a threat and caused you to panic a little bit and want to fill the space with a joke, another story, rerouting the conversation. But when we apply the lens of tension is just information about the dynamic, I want for you to just take a breath and be with whatever sensations are coming up in your body in that moment. Because a lot of times what's actually happening is the conversation is naturally settling. Because your ability to be with the silence and the pauses is actually creating space for her to feel into what was just said, to feel into what it feels like to be around you. She's gathering lots of data just by being in your presence. And so there really is no need to fill all of the space. Allowing there to be some healthy pauses, even when they feel uncomfortable or awkward because of how we had been seeing them, can actually be a sign of real inner security and confidence. And that can be really attractive. One of the skills that we teach everyone in a one-on-one context is how to self-soothe and self-assure, because that's what translates in those moments where there's a lull in conversation between someone experiencing you as being confident and secure within yourself, or focusing on the awkwardness that's occurring between the two of you. And again, if your habit is to monitor the emotional climate of the space, you may be assuming that awkwardness in the space is yours. And I want to just offer that sometimes it's not. And the more willing you are to just see awkwardness as happening in between the two of you, the more likely you are to respond to it in a way that actually moves the conversation forward in a healthy way. The second scenario would be when there's a little disagreement. Maybe you share an opinion and she pushes back on it a little bit. Nothing major, and in your mind, you know this isn't that serious. She's not angry or in a heavy debate, and yet you feel that tension rising in your body, that conflict is happening. And maybe you assume that you either need to let her be right or you're going to be that guy. So you try to neutralize the situation. You backtrack, you find common ground again, and try to get the conversation moving in a direction that feels like you're both on the same page. And while there is an element of safety that comes when you're tuned into the feminine nervous system like this, I want to zoom in a little bit more so that you have more language of exactly what's happening, because I find that in this particular type of instance, the advice is often too collapsed for you to actually discern what to do in that kind of scenario. Because while we do want to be attentive to the person that we're across from, and it's generous to tune into the female nervous system, you're most likely already doing that. And that's why I want to zoom into this other side of the equation where you're collapsing a moment of contrast, because it's just as attractive for a man to be aware of your experience as it is for those moments of contrast to reveal who he is, how he thinks about things, how he gets to those opinions, and vice versa for her. Which is why when you're willing to be with contrast, and I want to use that term, I've used it before in previous videos, I'll put them here and in the description as well, because when we think about polarity, there's an element of contrast that's required for us to build attraction. It's the distinction between me and you that allows for that magnetic pull to happen. When it's only sameness, we end up feeling a little bit flat in the connection. And so I'm assuming that you're already paying attention to her experience, and the more viscerally attuned you are, the more you're going to be able to feel this distinction that I'm making in the dynamic. But moments of contrast is where attraction naturally starts to build. And so each time you bring it back to sameness as a way of reducing tension, friction, and placating her, you're actually reducing the amount of contrast that's available that would otherwise create intrigue, distinction, and attraction. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What have you learned if you've been practicing being with more contrast? What have you learned works for you? And the last scenario that I see this play out is when sexual tension is present. When you're standing or sitting near her and you can feel something rising. Maybe historically it feels like uncertainty or I don't want to make her uncomfortable. And while again, that is generous to be aware of her experience and very fair. I'm not proposing we override any form of consent here. But if we were to put a new lens in place, being able to feel into that not quite resolved experience that's happening between the two of you, that's where chemistry is actually built. So if you're not able to expand your nervous system to tolerate tension, you're most likely going to pull back, wait for a very clear sign that she's interested in something more, and kind of go passive in that moment. When what's actually needed is for you to stay engaged. This is why I teach so much about visceral awareness. You're trying to navigate something visceral cognitively. And the more that you try to do that, the more you're going to be relying on overt signs that she's interested. And actually, the more that it's forcing her to also try to navigate cognitively, which is why it never feels quite as organic as you're hoping for it to. Because again, I'm not saying that we're overriding any kind of green lights here. What I am saying is that when you're able to be present with tension, you're going to be willing to stay in the visceral space with her long enough for that clarity to build naturally. And the men who teach pickup artistry or any kind of approach methodology, this is what they're actually teaching, is for you to learn how to read the visceral experience. And this is why the more that you can start to see tension as information about the dynamic and what's playing out, the easier it's going to be for you to navigate that. Because when you assume that you're causing tension and you're trying to erase it, you're actually reducing the visceral visibility that you would have to navigate what's happening in real life. It reminds me of, and this is probably not the best metaphor, but it's the one coming to me right now, how when they have light shows, they often have fog machines as well, because it makes the beams of light and the direction that they're going more visible to the naked eye. The same thing is true when it comes to sexual tension. Tension being the fog machine that's allowing you to see where to direct your attention. So the more that you're trying to reduce any kind of tension in the space, the less likely you're going to be able to see where the beam of light is pointing your attention to. Because women are actually looking for the experience of a man being able to hold a certain amount of charge in his nervous system, whether it's tension, contrast, or just nervous system charge. His ability to be with that and allow his nervous system to expand the capacity to be with it is a really attractive quality because it's in direct contrast to how the feminine nervous system works. So every time you're thinking tension equals something that I've done and therefore I need to reduce it so that we can come back together, it's actually not giving her the opportunity to see who you actually are as a man and how you show up when there's aliveness in the space. Again, tension has several different flavors, and sometimes it can be genuine social discomfort where we need to be paying attention to the other person. But I'm going out on a limb and saying that you're very aware of that experience. These other forms of tension are the ones that you're after, that you're not able to access because you're assuming that all of them mean the same thing when they don't. And now that you have some clarity about where these beliefs came from and the particular ways that what you're perceiving doesn't necessarily line up with what's happening in reality, not that your perception's wrong, but the way that you were taught to interpret it may be a little bit off, and that's what's causing the issue for you. My hope is that you can start to see a little bit more delineation when you think of the word tension, whether it be true social discomfort that you need to respond to, just contrast between you and another person, and that feeling of aliveness that comes into a space when you're excited about something. Each of these three have a different feeling, and the more that you can attune yourself to discern which one is actually occurring in the space, the more you're going to respond appropriately in any of those dynamics. Because tension doesn't mean that you've done something wrong. It also means that you're just alive and you're engaging with another person. And sometimes the other person isn't actually uncomfortable, they're just engaged. That's why tension is in between you. Your job isn't to eliminate it, it's to learn how to stay present with it so that you can discern which flavor of tension is being created in the dynamic and decide how you want to respond based on that information. This concept is one that we discuss in our embodiment group, Grounded, which is designed to help you tap into that visceral experience so that you can discern not only which type of tension is at play, but also learn how to read and navigate social dynamics with a little bit more ease. If that's something that you want some more information around, I'm going to put it in the description below. And if any of these scenarios resonated with you, I think you're going to like this video where you can learn more about visceral communication and how it impacts your relationship with everybody, especially women.